The sun dipped low over Harriston, Georgia, painting Veterans Memorial Park in hues of amber and shadow. Malcolm "Mac" Jackson ran his usual evening route, his boots pounding the cracked pavement in a steady rhythm that drowned out the ghosts of war still whispering in his mind. Titan, his German shepherd, kept pace beside him, ears perked and eyes sharp, a loyal shadow forged in the crucible of military service. Mac's dog tags clinked softly against his chest, a tether to the life he'd left behind after 12 years in special ops. Here, in this small southeastern town, those tags meant little to the locals who eyed him warily. A tall black man in a place where history lingered like a bruise. The air carried the faint hum of cicadas, but something else prickled at Mac's senses tonight. A police cruiser rolled slowly past the park's edge, its headlights cutting through the dusk. Sergeant Earl "Buck" Thornton sat behind the wheel, his grizzled face half lit, eyes locked on Mac with a predator's focus. Mac's jaw tightened, but he kept running, forcing his breathing to stay even. He'd seen that look before, overseas in hostile territory, and now here, in the town he'd once called home. Titan's low growl vibrated through the leash, a warning Mac felt in his bones. Trouble was circling, and in Harriston, it always wore a badge. Mac pushed the unease down, focusing on the rhythm of his steps as he and Titan rounded the park's final bend. The cruiser disappeared behind a row of live oaks, but its presence lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. He'd come back to Harriston hoping for peace. Runs like this were his sanctuary, a way to quiet the echoes of gunfire and fallen brothers that haunted his dreams. But peace was a fragile thing here, where the badge wasn't just law, but a weapon, wielded by men like Buck Thornton to keep folks in line. Mac had heard the whispers at the Veterans Center, increased patrols, harassment, a town where asking questions could cost you more than you bargained for. As they slowed to a walk, Mac reached down to scratch Titan's ears, the dog leaning into his touch with a contented wag of his tail. "Good run, boy," he murmured, his voice low and steady, but his eyes scanned the lengthening shadows, catching the flicker of headlights in the distance. Buck's cruiser circling back, slower this time, deliberate. Mac's combat instincts flared. He'd faced ambushes before, but never on American soil. The irony twisted in his gut. He'd fought for freedom abroad only to find it rationed out here. Whatever Buck was planning, Mac knew it wouldn't end with a stare down. Tonight felt different, and as the dusk deepened, he braced himself for the trap he couldn't yet see. The late October air bit at Malcolm "Mac" Jackson's skin as he pulled into the rundown gas station on the outskirts of Harriston. Titan sat alert in the back seat, head tilted toward the cracked window, ears twitching at the hum of the flickering neon sign above. The tank was nearly empty, and with client meetings lined up tomorrow for his security consulting gig, Mac figured he'd fill up now. The forecourt was deserted save for a couple of beat-up sedans at the far pumps and a police cruiser parked ominously near the convenience store entrance. Through the grimy windows, Mac caught the glint of eyes watching him. Buck Thornton and another officer, their gazes heavy with unspoken intent. He swiped his card at the pump, every movement deliberate, his combat-trained senses buzzing. The night felt too still, too charged. Then a muffled shout broke the silence. Near the store entrance, Buck and his partner had cornered Tommy T.J. Evans, a skinny 16-year-old Mac knew from the neighborhood. TJ's Letterman jacket hung loose on his trembling frame as Buck loomed over him, barking questions about where he'd gotten the cash for it. "Football team, sir," TJ stammered, hands raised, voice cracking. Buck's fist slammed into the kid's stomach, doubling him over. Mac's grip tightened on the pump handle, his pulse spiking. Every instinct screamed at him to step in, but years in Harriston had taught him the cost of playing hero too soon. Mac forced himself to look away, replacing the gas cap with slow, measured movements, keeping TJ in his peripheral vision. The kid's pleas echoed across the lot. "I can show you my ID, sir." But Buck's partner snapped. "Keep your hands where they are." TJ flinched, pressing himself against the wall as if he could vanish into it. Mac's jaw clenched. He'd seen this dance before, the calculated intimidation meant to provoke a reaction, justify an escalation. Buck's voice carried a sneer. "Too nice a jacket for a punk like you." No body cams were rolling. Another detail Mac filed away, along with their badge numbers. Thornton, 214, the other, 189. He slid back into his truck, Titan whining softly, picking up the tension radiating off him. "I know, boy," Mac muttered, taking the long way home through Harriston's backroads. The scene replayed in his mind. TJ's fear, Buck's casual brutality. He wondered if he should have done more. But in this town, stepping in often painted a target on your back. The cruiser hadn't followed him, not yet, but Mac knew it was only a matter of time. Buck's eyes at the park. Now this, it wasn't random. Something was brewing, and TJ was just the spark. As the headlights cut through the dark, Mac's gut told him the next move wouldn't be long coming, and it'd be aimed straight at him. Malcolm "Mac" Jackson gripped the steering wheel as he navigated the winding back roads of Harriston, the gas station encounter still burning in his mind. Titan shifted in the back seat, sensing the tension that coiled tighter with every mile. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the hum of the truck's engine and the occasional chirp of crickets. 3 blocks from home, red and blue lights flared in his rearview mirror. Mac checked his speed, dead on the limit, registration current, taillights intact. He knew this wasn't about a violation. It was Buck Thornton making his move. He pulled over smoothly, hands visible on the wheel. Every motion a practiced ritual from years of stops like this, before and after the military. Titan stayed quiet, trained to hold steady in chaos. In the side mirror, Mac watched Sergeant Earl Buck Thornton swagger out of the cruiser, hand resting on his holster like it belonged there. The man's bulk filled the frame, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark, blinding Mac as it danced across the truck's interior, lingering on Titan before snapping back to his face. "License and registration," Buck barked. No preamble, no courtesy. Mac kept his voice level. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" Buck's lips curled into a smirk. "Suspicious vehicle in a high-crime area. License, now." The air crackled with menace, and Mac knew this was no routine pullover. It was a trap springing shut. Mac reached for his wallet, slow and deliberate. "I'm getting my ID from my back pocket, sir," he said, handing over his license, registration, and military ID, a habit from too many nights like this. Buck snatched them, studying the cards with exaggerated scrutiny, turning them over as if hunting for flaws. "Military, huh? Special ops?" His tone dripped with mockery. "These look fake to me. Where'd you buy 'em? Some vet bar." Mac's pulse quickened, but he held steady. "They're federal IDs, Sergeant. 12 years honorably discharged. You can verify with—" "Step out of the vehicle." Buck cut him off, yanking the door open. A second cruiser screeched up, lights pulsing, boxing Mac in. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong," he said, calm but firm. "Out. Now hands where I can see 'em." Mac complied, stepping into the cold night air, Titan growling low but staying put. Buck's partner circled behind, boots crunching gravel, while a young female officer, Clara Hensley, watched from the second cruiser, her face tight with unease. "We got a robbery report," Buck sneered, closing the distance. "Tall, black male, dark jacket. Sound familiar?" Mac met his gaze. "That could be half the town. I was running at the park, then got gas. Check the cameras." Buck's grin widened. "Resisting now, are we?" Before Mac could answer, Buck's fist crashed into his ribs, and the world tilted as he hit the pavement, dog tags snapping free under the weight of the blow. The cell door slammed shut behind Malcolm "Mac" Jackson, the clang echoing off the damp concrete walls of Harriston's police station. Pain radiated from his ribs where Buck Thornton's fists had landed, but he forced himself to stand tall, blood trickling from a split lip. The air stank of sweat and mildew, a grim reminder of the town's underbelly. Titan's howls faded as they'd driven away, leaving Mac with nothing but the broken chain of his dog tags scattered on the pavement outside. In the dim light, he scanned the cell. 2 metal benches, a flickering bulb, and 3 other occupants staring back at him. One was Tommy T.J. Evans, the kid from the gas station, his Letterman jacket torn, face bruised purple from Buck's earlier lesson. Beside him sat Ray Carver, a grizzled homeless vet Mac recognized from the shelter, his eyes hollow but sharp. "Mac?" Ray rasped, voice barely above a whisper. What the hell they doing to you? Before Mac could answer, the third man, a wiry guy with a nervous twitch, shifted uncomfortably, muttering about keeping quiet. TJ's gaze locked on Mac, wide with fear and a flicker of hope. They said I stole something, he whispered. I didn't. Mac nodded, his special ops instincts kicking in. Assess, adapt, survive. Footsteps approached, and through the bars he glimpsed Officer Clara Hensley, her face pale, clutching a clipboard like a shield. Clara hesitated, her eyes darting down the corridor before stepping closer to the cell. Jackson, she said, voice clipped but softer than Buck's barking commands. She slipped a small gauze pad through the bars, her fingers trembling slightly. For your lip. I'm sorry. The words hung heavy, a crack in the precinct's iron facade. Mac took the pad, pressing it to his mouth, tasting blood and gratitude. Thanks, he murmured, studying her. Young, green, caught in a machine she didn't fully understand yet. She nodded curtly and turned away, but not before Mac caught the conflict in her eyes. Ray shifted on the bench, making room. They're scared of you, Mac, he said low. Decorated vet like you in here? That's a spotlight they don't want. TJ scooted closer, his voice shaking. They're gonna pin something on me, too. I heard him laughing about it. Mac's mind raced. Buck wasn't just flexing power. This was a setup, and they were all pawns. The cell felt smaller, the walls pressing in with the weight of a system that thrived on silence. He wiped the blood from his chin, resolve hardening. We're not done yet, he told them, voice steady despite the ache in his chest. Outside, he heard the faint hum of a crowd, phones clicking, voices rising. Word was spreading, and Buck's house of cards was starting to tremble. Mac just had to hold on. The precinct buzzed with late-night tension as Malcolm Mac Jackson sat in his cell, the gauze from Clara Hensley still pressed to his lip. The faint hum of voices outside grew louder. Protesters, maybe neighbors, their anger seeping through the concrete walls. Inside, the air was thick with desperation, officers scurrying like ants under a lifted rock. Then a sharp, familiar voice cut through the din. Where's my brother? I'm a journalist, and you're damn right I'll make this public. Lila Jackson stormed into the station, her presence a lit fuse in Buck Thornton's powder keg. Mac's heart lifted, a rare crack in his stoic mask. Lila faced off with Buck at the front desk, her words ringing clear even through the cell block's heavy doors. Malcolm Jackson's a decorated vet. You've got no right to hold him without charges. Buck's growl was low, menacing. Back off, lady, or you'll regret it. Lila didn't flinch. Threaten me again, Sergeant. I'd love to quote you. She turned on her heel, promising calls to every news outlet in Georgia. Mac knew her. She'd burned Harriston down before letting this slide. Ray Carver nudged him from the bench. Your sister's a damn hurricane. TJ, still shaken, managed a faint grin. She's gonna get us out, right? Mac nodded, but his eyes stayed on the corridor where Clara lingered, eavesdropping on Buck's next move, her face pale with something like dread. Clara Hensley clutched her clipboard tighter as Buck barked orders down the hall. Get that truck searched. Plant the goods under the seat. Make it stick. His voice carried a frantic edge, the first sign of cracks in his iron grip. Clara's eyes flickered toward the cell block, then away, her knuckles whitening. Mac caught it all, the shift in her posture, the way she lingered just out of Buck's sight. She was hearing too much, knowing too much, and it was eating at her. He'd seen that look in green recruits overseas, doubt creeping in where loyalty once stood unchallenged. The cell grew quieter as Lila's storming exit left a vacuum, but the tension only thickened. Ray leaned in, voice a gravelly whisper. They're spooked, Mac. Your sister's got 'em running scared. Mac's mind churned. Lila's article would hit soon, and Buck's desperation was a ticking clock. He'd escalate, pin more on him and TJ, maybe worse. They'll come for us harder now, Mac said, meeting TJ's wide eyes. But she's buying us time. Through the bars, he glimpsed Clara slip a phone from her pocket, her fingers hesitating over the screen. Was she recording? Reaching out? Whatever it was, she snapped it shut fast as Buck's shadow loomed closer. The precinct's walls seemed to pulse with the weight of secrets unraveling, and Mac braced himself, Lila's fight outside was about to ignite a war within these walls. The interrogation room door banged open, and Malcolm Mac Jackson was shoved inside. His wrists chafed raw from the cuffs Buck Thornton's men had slapped on too tight. The air was stale, tinged with the metallic tang of fear and old blood. Buck loomed in the doorway, his bulk casting a shadow across the scarred metal table. "Sit," he snarled, slamming a thick file down. "Stolen goods, planted evidence, a robbery Mac never committed. Confess, and this ends easy. Keep playing hero, and you'll wish you hadn't." Mac sat, spine straight, eyes locked on Buck's. "I'm not signing lies," he said, voice steady despite the ache in his bruised ribs. Buck's grin was a jagged thing, all teeth and menace. "You think your sister's little article's gonna save you? We'll bury you so deep, she'll choke on the dirt trying to dig you out." He leaned in close, breath hot with stale coffee and spite. "Got witnesses, evidence. Your truck's a damn crime scene now." Mac's mind flashed to Clara Hensley, her furtive glance at her phone earlier. Was she in on this, or breaking free? Before he could answer, Buck's fist crashed into his jaw, snapping his head back. Pain exploded, but Mac didn't flinch. Years in special ops had taught him to take a hit and stay sharp. Through the haze, he caught a flicker of movement at the window. Clara, phone in hand, filming in secret. Blood trickled from Mac's mouth, pooling on the table as Buck stepped back, knuckles red and gleaming. "Tough guy, huh? We'll see how long that lasts." He nodded to his partner, a wiry officer with dead eyes who cracked his fists like he'd been waiting for this. The next blow caught Mac in the ribs, a sharp crack echoing as pain seared through him. He gritted his teeth, forcing air into his lungs. Name, rank, serial number. The old mantra keeping him grounded. This wasn't a battlefield overseas. It was Harriston, and the enemy wore badges. Through swollen eyes, he tracked Clara at the window, her phone steady now, capturing every brutal second. Her face was a mask of conflict, fear warring with something fiercer. Buck circled him, voice low and venomous. "Your kind never learns. Think you're above us 'cause you wore a uniform. Well, in my house, you're nothing." He grabbed Mac's hair, yanking his head back. "Confess, or we'll find that mutt of yours and make sure he don't bark again." Titan's image flashed in Mac's mind, fueling a surge of defiance. "Do what you want," he rasped, "but people are watching now." Buck's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt breaking his swagger. The room's silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the precinct beyond. Chaos brewing, Lila's storm gaining strength. Mac held on to that thought as the next punch landed, knowing the walls were closing in on Buck too. The first whispers of dawn crept through Harriston as Lila Jackson's article hit the wires, a Molotov cocktail of truth igniting the town. "Harriston PD exposed, veteran beaten, framed by corrupt cops," screamed across screens, her words backed by leaked photos of Malcolm Mac Jackson's bruised face, snapped by an anonymous source. The precinct erupted into chaos, officers scrambling as phones buzzed with furious calls from citizens and news outlets. Buck Thornton's bellows echoed down the halls, his voice hoarse with panic. "Shred it! Burn it! Get that evidence room torched! Now!" Smoke began curling from the back of the station, a desperate bid to erase years of filth. In his cell, Mac felt the shift, the air heavy with ash and fear. His ribs throbbed, but his mind was clear. Lila had lit the fuse, and the FBI couldn't be far behind. Footsteps clattered closer, and Officer Clara Hensley appeared, breathless, sliding a security badge through the bars. "Go!" she hissed, eyes wild. "They're burning it all. Use the old wing." Mac grabbed the badge, his fingers brushing hers, a silent pact forged in that split second. The lock clicked open, and he bolted, pain screaming through his body as he slipped into the precinct's decaying east wing. Behind him, shouts rang out, Buck's men realizing their prey was loose. Through a broken window, he glimpsed FBI vans rolling silently into position, their lights off, but their intent unmistakable. Mac pressed into the shadows of the old wing, the air thick with dust and the acrid sting of smoke creeping closer. The walls here were relics, peeling paint, rusted pipes, a forgotten corner of Harriston's precinct that Buck's fire hadn't yet swallowed. His special ops training took over. Move silent, stay low, find the exit. The badge Clara gave him burned in his grip, a lifeline through this maze of corruption. He edged along a crumbling hallway, ears straining for the clatter of boots or Buck's furious roars. The fire alarm screeched to life, a shrill wail masking his steps as he ducked into a maintenance closet, its door hanging off one hinge. Through a slit in the wall, he saw the evidence room blaze, flames licking at boxes of falsified reports, years of lies turning to ash. But Mac wasn't running blind. He remembered Clara's footage, Lila's fight. The truth was out there now, clawing free despite Buck's torch. A distant crash signaled the FBI breaching the front. Shouts, commands, the thud of boots on concrete. Mac's chest tightened. Freedom was close, but so was Buck, a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. He pushed toward a boarded window at the hall's end, prying it loose with shaking hands. The cool morning air hit his face, laced with the promise of justice and the danger of a final reckoning with the man who'd tried to break him. Malcolm Mac Jackson crouched in the old wing's flickering shadows, the window he'd pried open letting in a sliver of dawn and the distant wail of sirens. Smoke stung his eyes as the fire Buck Thornton had set roared closer, devouring the precinct's secrets. Mac's ribs screamed with every breath, but he pushed forward, Clara's badge still clenched in his fist. The corridor ended at a rusted locker room, its air heavy with mold and the ghosts of Harriston's past. He froze as a shadow loomed in the doorway. Buck, his bulk unmistakable, a revolver glinting in his hand. "Quite a chase, Jackson," Buck growled, voice thick with rage and ash. "But it's over." He stepped closer, boots crunching debris, eyes wild like a trapped beast. Max straightened despite the pain, meeting that gaze with steel forged in war zones. "You think burning it all down saves you?" he said, low and steady. "The feds are here. It's done." Buck's laugh was a jagged rasp. "Not till you're gone." He raised the gun, finger tightening, then a blur crashed into him from the side. Clara Hensley, wild-eyed and panting, tackled Buck, sending the shot wide into the ceiling. Plaster rained down as Mac lunged, adrenaline overriding his injuries. He wrestled the gun free, pinning Buck's arm as Clara stumbled back, gasping. "Go!" she yelled, shoving Mac toward the window. "I've got this!" Mac hesitated, the chaos swirling around him. Clara's shout, Buck's thrashing bulk, the roar of flames licking closer. Buck roared, breaking free from Clara's grip, his fist slamming into her jaw. She crumpled, blood streaking her face, but her eyes blazed with defiance. "Run, damn it!" she spat, clawing at Buck's legs to buy Mac's seconds. He didn't waste them. With a final shove, he squeezed through the window, landing hard on the gravel outside, pain exploding through his battered frame. The cool air hit him like a lifeline, sirens now deafening as FBI vans screeched into the lot. He staggered upright, clutching the wall for support, and glanced back. Through the smoke, he saw Buck haul Clara up, his gun reclaimed, pressing it to her temple. "You're next, Jackson," Buck bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation. Mac's heart pounded. Clara's sacrifice couldn't be for nothing. He spotted an evidence bag near the window, papers spilling out. Buck's own records, half charred but damning. He snatched it, tucking it against his chest as FBI agents swarmed the building, their shouts cutting through the haze. Buck's silhouette vanished into the inferno he'd created, dragging Clara with him. Mac stumbled toward the feds, the weight of her choice sinking in. She'd crossed the line for him, for truth. The precinct burned behind him, but the fight wasn't over. It was just shifting ground. The precinct's east lot erupted into chaos as FBI agents stormed in, their black vests stark against the smoke billowing from the burning building. Malcolm Mac Jackson stumbled forward, the half-charred evidence bag clutched tight to his chest. Each step a battle against the pain racking his body. Special Agent Lisa Carter spotted him first, her sharp eyes narrowing as she waved medics over. "Jackson, over here," she barked, cutting through the clamor of shouts and sirens. Mac collapsed against an FBI van, handing her the bag. "Buck's file," he rasped, blood staining his teeth. "Everything's in there. Years of it." Carter ripped the bag open, scanning the singed pages. Payoffs, false arrests, a ledger of corruption in Buck Thornton's own scrawl. Her jaw tightened. "This is gold. Where's Thornton?" Mac pointed back at the inferno. "Inside with Clara. He's got her hostage." Carter's radio crackled to life, barking orders as tactical teams fanned out, securing the perimeter. The fire roared louder, glass shattering in the heat, but Mac's gaze stayed locked on the building. Clara's face flashed in his mind, her tackle, her scream to run. She'd turned on Buck, risked everything, and now she was trapped. Lila Jackson pushed through the crowd, her camera crew in tow, eyes wide with relief and fury as she reached him. "Mac, you're alive, thank God." He gripped her arm, voice low. "It's not over yet." Lila hugged Mac fiercely, her breath hitching as she pulled back to study his battered face. "I got Titan safe with neighbors," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "And the articles everywhere. FBI's here because of it." Mac nodded, the weight of her words anchoring him as medics swarmed, pressing gauze to his wounds. Agent Carter flipped through the files, her expression darkening with each page. "This ties Thornton to half the department, judges too. We've got enough for a federal sweep." She glanced at the burning precinct, flames licking the sky. "But if he's still in there, he's a loose end." A muffled gunshot rang out from the building, sharp and final, freezing everyone in place. Mac's gut twisted. Clara. Agents surged forward, shouting commands, but the heat held them back. "He's desperate," Mac said, forcing himself upright despite the medic's protests. "He'll kill her to spite us." Carter met his eyes, a silent agreement passing between them. "We'll get him," she promised, then turned to her team. "Secure the evidence. Lock down the scene. Thornton doesn't walk away from this." Lila squeezed Mac's hand, her camera crew filming the chaos as news vans rolled in. The fire was swallowing Buck's kingdom, but Mac knew the man wouldn't go down quietly. Somewhere in that inferno, Buck was plotting his next move, and Mac braced for the storm still brewing beneath the ashes. The sun hung low over Harriston, casting long shadows as the precinct's smoldering ruins cooled under the watchful eyes of FBI agents. Malcolm "Mac" Jackson sat in the mobile command center, a medic stitching his split lip, while Agent Lisa Carter briefed her team. The files he'd salvaged were spread across a table. Buck Thornton's empire laid bare in ink and ash. But the gunshot from the fire lingered in Mac's mind, a ghost of Clara Hensley's fate he couldn't shake. "He's not dead," Mac said, voice rough. "Buck's too stubborn to go down like that." Carter nodded, her face grim. "We've got no body yet. He could have slipped out." Across town, Buck Thornton huddled in a derelict warehouse, his uniform singed, blood streaking his face from the scuffle with Clara. Two loyal officers flanked him, hardened men who'd thrived under his reign. "Jackson's still breathing," Buck spat, reloading his revolver with trembling hands. "We end him tonight, make it look like he cracked, took his own life." His men nodded, eyes glinting with desperation and greed. Clara, bound and gagged in the corner, glared through a swollen eye, her defiance unbroken despite the beating. Back at the command center, a text buzzed on Carter's phone. An anonymous tip. "Watch the warehouse district. Thornton's planning." Mac's gaze sharpened. "He's coming for me," he said, standing despite the medic's protests. "And I'll be ready." Mac's words hung heavy as Lila Jackson burst into the command center, her face pale but fierce. "I got a call. Someone saw Buck near the old textile warehouse," she said, clutching her phone. "He's got men with him." Agent Carter's radio crackled, confirming the tip as drones buzzed overhead, zeroing in on the district. Mac's ribs ached, but his special ops instincts flared. He knew Buck's playbook. Strike hard, leave no witnesses. "He'll use Clara as bait," Mac warned, grabbing a vest despite Carter's frown. "We need to move now." At that moment, Colonel Nathan "Hawk" Reynolds strode in, his presence commanding the room. Fresh from the Pentagon, his steel-gray eyes locked on Mac. "Heard about your mess, Jackson," he said, voice clipped. "Thornton's not just your problem. He's a disgrace to every uniform. I've got a team en route." Relief flickered in Mac's chest. Hawk had pulled him through hell overseas, and now he was here to finish this. Carter briefed Hawk fast. Warehouse layout, Buck's likely firepower, Clara's life on the line. He's cornered, Hawk said, studying a map. Men like him get sloppy when they're desperate. Mac nodded, the weight of Clara's sacrifice and Lila's fight fueling him. Then we corner him back. Outside, the sky darkened, a storm brewing over Harriston as the FBI mobilized. Buck's revenge was coming, but so was justice. And Mac wouldn't face it alone. The private airfield outside Harriston lay quiet under a moonless sky, its runway lights flickering like a trap waiting to snap shut. Malcolm "Mac" Jackson crouched behind an FBI van, his vest tight against bruised ribs, eyes scanning the sleek jet prepped for takeoff. Buck Thornton's escape plan was clear: flee south, new identity in hand. But Mac wouldn't let him slip away. Agent Lisa Carter whispered into her radio, coordinating tactical teams as Colonel Nathan "Hawk" Reynolds adjusted his scope beside Mac. "He's got 2 ex-military contractors," Hawk muttered, spotting armed figures near the plane. "And Clara's with him." Through binoculars, Mac saw Buck emerge from the terminal, dragging Clara Hensley, her hands bound, a gun pressed to her head. His face was a mask of fury, singed uniform clinging to his frame. "Move it!" Buck barked at his men, voice cracking with paranoia. Mac's grip tightened on his borrowed pistol. Clara's bruised face, her sacrifice in the precinct, fueled a fire in him. "We hit him now," he said, voice low. Carter nodded, signaling the teams. Helicopter rotors thumped overhead as agents rappelled down, cutting off Buck's retreat. Tires screeched as FBI vehicles roared onto the tarmac, floodlights blinding the scene. "Sergeant Earl Thornton!" Carter's megaphone boomed. "You're surrounded. Drop the weapon." Buck froze, his contractors hesitating, guns half raised. Mac locked eyes with Clara across the chaos. She nodded faintly, a soldier's resolve in her gaze. Buck's hand twitched, the revolver digging deeper into Clara's temple as the FBI closed in. "Back off, or she's done!" he roared, sweat beading on his scorched brow. His contractors shifted, caught between loyalty and survival, their rifles wavering. Mac's heart pounded. He knew Buck's desperation made him lethal. But Clara's nod had been a signal. She'd fight if he did. "Now!" Mac hissed, breaking cover with Hawk at his side. A gunshot split the night. Clara twisted, slamming her elbow into Buck's gut, sending his shot wild into the jet's wing. Sparks flew as Mac charged, tackling one contractor while Hawk dropped the other with a precise shot. Buck stumbled, firing blindly, a bullet grazing Mac's shoulder. Pain flared, but Mac powered through, slamming Buck against the plane's hull. The gun clattered free, and Mac pinned him, knee grinding into his spine. "It's over," he growled, blood dripping from his arm. Clara staggered up, ripping her gag off, and kicked Buck's weapon out of reach. FBI agents swarmed, cuffing the contractors as Carter approached, her face set in grim triumph. "Earl Thornton, you're under arrest. Civil rights violations, conspiracy, attempted murder." Buck thrashed, spitting curses, but his empire was dust. Mac stood, offering Clara a hand. She took it, her grip firm despite the tremble. "Thanks," she whispered. The jet's engines whined uselessly behind them. Buck's last stand had failed, but the cost still hung heavy. The federal courthouse in downtown Harriston stood solemn under a crisp March sky, its marble halls packed as the trial of Earl Buck Thornton reached its end. Malcolm "Mac" Jackson sat in the front row, his restored dog tags gleaming against his dress uniform, a quiet testament to the fight he'd endured. Lila Jackson gripped his hand, her eyes fierce with pride. She'd turned their nightmare into a national reckoning. 3 months after the airfield showdown, Buck faced justice. His empire of corruption crumbled by the files Mac had salvaged in Clara Hensley's testimony. The jury's verdict came swift, guilty on all counts, life without parole. Clara took the stand one last time, her voice steady as she recounted turning on Buck, filming his crimes, and risking her life to free Mac. "I swore an oath to protect," she said, glancing at him. Silence wasn't an option. The room hushed as Tommy T.J. Evans stepped forward, a surprise witness. "That night at the gas station," he revealed, pulling a recorder from his pocket, "I taped Buck threatening me. Kept it quiet to protect Mac till now." The audio played, Buck's voice raw and damning, sealing his fate beyond doubt. Mac's chest tightened. TJ's courage, hidden all this time, was the final nail in the coffin. Outside, Harriston buzzed with change. The old precinct, now a community center, its scars paved over by hope. But the day wasn't done. A deeper healing awaited. The sun dipped low as Max stood before Veterans Memorial Park, Titan at his side, facing a crowd of Harriston's residents. Veterans, families, kids like TJ, now a college freshman thanks to Lila's scholarship fund. The precinct's fall had sparked reform. New cops walked beats with body cams, their badges symbols of trust, not terror. Mac held his repaired dog tags, their shine catching the light, and handed them to TJ. "You held the line when I couldn't," he said, voice thick. "This is yours now." TJ took them, eyes wide, then saluted, a soldier's gesture from a kid who'd found his fight. The crowd erupted, applause rolling like thunder. Clara approached, her limp faint but real, a scar from Buck's last stand. "We rebuilt it together," she said, nodding at the community center behind them, its walls painted with murals of justice. Lila joined them, her latest article framing Harriston as a beacon of change. "It's not just our story," she said. "It's theirs." Mac looked out. Kids played free. Elders sat unafraid. A town reborn from ashes. The weight of his ordeal lifted, replaced by a quiet vow. To guard this fragile peace. As dusk settled, Colonel Hawk Reynolds clapped his shoulder. "You didn't just win a battle, Jackson. You started a war on corruption." Mac nodded, the horizon glowing with promise. Harriston's dawn wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, forged in truth, sealed with courage, a legacy echoing far beyond its borders.